So greetings. Welcome to Outside the Class. This way of doing things, we can watch the video before we start discussing, and then we can chat about it after. We hope to keep these to around 15 minutes or so. Easy to catch, easier to catch up on. So today on Outside the Class, we're going to continue our Matthew series, right? We're at episode 19. Jesus gives us a sign, and again, with Tim Mackie. So don't forget, in the description below are links to all of the audio, video, and source documents we use here on the Dusty Feet. We want to make sure that any material we use here is properly credited to those folks who work so hard to bring it to us. Without their efforts, learning we do here does not happen. So be sure to click to subscribe, hit that bell icon for a reminder. And as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place we can safely explore the endless ways of God, interconnection of His creation, where belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. So here we go with some more Outside the Class on the Dusty Feet. Okay, so remember, as always, it is expected that you watch the reference videos first so you can get a context for this discussion and to hear the perspective of the originator. Again, in this case, with the Matthew series, Tim Mackie. But tonight, also, without giving too much away, there's an additional video to watch. It is very much part of this discussion. It is God on Trial. So be aware that it's challenging to watch and it's not child friendly in any way. If you don't pause here to watch it, and I do recommend, I hope that you eventually can. It will add context to our discussion. So if you haven't done it yet, pause this, click on the links in the description, and then when you come back, we can chat. And we're back. I love uncomfortable passages. I love odd passages. And with this, we get aplenty. Yet, we're going a direction that you might have guessed if you watched the additional video. It's God on Trial. Because it has been something that I've pondered before. As Tim Mackie phrased it, putting God on the witness stand, asking for proof. You know, the phrase hit me, and it reminded me of a short series that we did here on the Dusty Feet, right? It was about this very PBS masterpiece contemporary movie, God on Trial. You know, it was a series that did cause issues with the channel. So I don't have the episodes that we discussed it with my brother Jim on our Follow the Red String series. And I'm sorry, because we really did enjoy doing them, right? It is a very powerful and insightful story. You know, it's reportedly based on actual events in the concentration camp at Auschwitz. And I think it's related to this story in a very real way, because both are based, at least partially, on an expectation. And that expectation is about God. God is put on trial by captured Jews. They're in this concentration camp, and this is about the covenant, about the Messiah, and why, as they deliberate, they're there. So in our story in Matthew, they're asking for a sign. Did it hit you like it did me that Jesus had already been performing signs, right? Miracles, healing many, possibly hundreds. And yet they, in this instance, the Pharisees, are asking for signs. We've seen in the preceding chapters that there have been multiple exchanges and witnessed events by these Pharisees of these signs and wonders. So it's not just they're hearing about. So maybe, just maybe, there is something a bit stretching about the question, again, about give us a sign. We have so many expectations running around, right? As we've been discussing quite a bit lately. And they're coming from all sides, right? From John, his herald, right? The disciples, the surrounding crowds, that lingering crowd, right? And of course, the Pharisees. We at times, I believe all too often, still don't really realize the situation that these people are in at the moment. In their collective memory, we have, of course, a total invasion and occupation, a corruption of the priestly system with appointments by Rome, heavy taxation, and control. We have a brutal purge of children 2 and under only, 30 years ago? That's like 1992 for us. So it's not so far back that it was brushed off or swept away. The herald of this man, claiming to be the Messiah, he's actually in prison at the moment, remember? So it does not paint a very good picture, does it? Remember, we have an expectation of the Messiah. All of them had the expectation of the Messiah, but they don't see it. So go back to God on trial. These are captured Jews. They've been imprisoned, tortured, put to death by an invading army. And this is only because they were Jews, nothing more. They, through the promise of Abraham, were chosen by God, selected as a people to represent God, to herald God, to be a light for God. There was an expectation based on a covenant with that forefather, again, Abraham. And it appears with this covenantal expectation, right, that it wasn't being seen. So they put God on trial. This is in a way an opposite, an upside down, so to speak, as in they see no signs. And no signs means maybe that the covenant is not being kept. Expectations with no signs. Then we go back to this part of Matthew, and we see these Pharisees wanting signs. Yet we have signs all around. So expectations with signs or no signs. So it seems a common thread, red strings, so to speak, of signs, but in the context of expectations, what we expect to see. Maybe another question that can be asked, maybe, that are there signs or parts of a promise, a covenant, right, that we don't see or our expectations cause us not to see? And what might we be missing? And if you thought I had the magic answer, that might be an erroneous expectation because I don't know. It seems that Jesus points out something about Jonah, and from our perspective, an allusion to what will eventually be his own death, burial, and resurrection. But if I'm not mistaken, this is the first reference to those events, and at least in this accounting by Matthew, right? So even the disciples, they weren't even exposed to this thought before it was brought up to the Pharisees. We are so used to knowing the story, but did we stop to ask where they were then in the story? So back to God on trial. There's a very uncomfortable and disturbing scene about the story of Liebel and his sons. It's about choice, with no answer, only asking more questions. And then that leads to the final closing arguments for the trial. Now, I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it yet about their eventual verdict. But the most telling scene is the end, where even with the discussions, debates, arguments, there was a very real response. A response that even if we don't get it, and you'll see if you have, then you'll know what I mean. Aside from the expectation, with all that they think they knew and all that they had and were experiencing and their impending future, whether it was right or wrong, they still have the choice to abandon God or not. Back to Matthew. So it seems the religious leaders of the day, according to this interaction with Jesus, they were supposed to be getting something, right? That what they had been seeing up to that point should have been steering them to a different realization. I wonder a bit sometimes about these religious leaders, right? We know that the high priest, Caiaphas, is not of the line of Aaron. He's a political appointment of Rome, right? And I wonder how many others were in positions that they weren't supposed to be in. And then maybe a point to be considered possibly if the proper leadership had been in place. This has been going on for quite some time, right? Being a conquered and occupied nation comes with wrong guys in charge, right? And if the ones who should have been were there, then maybe they would have seen it. We'll never know. But it does seem that Jesus did have an expectation. Interesting thought. So we still find ourselves in the same boat. We know what we know, and we see what we see. And at times, we have expectations of God. And as Tim talked about it, what if the view we have, and it has some challenges with it? What do we do when our expectations are not met? How would or do we respond? And oddly enough, I hope, I would do and tend to lean towards and side with the Jews in God on trial. Even if it does not appear to be happening or going the way we expect, I'll let you watch the end. And then you'll see what I see, I hope. And here's a point to ponder. And I'm going to repeat this again because I think it's an important thing to be repeated. And I still like it. It's from Anne McCaffrey. Always remember, make no judgments where you have no compassion. Make no judgments where you have no compassion. Thanks again for being with us today on Outside the Class on the Dusty Feet.